It's a wonderful Thursday morning on this 25th of November, 2024. Good morning to you, Theo.
A very good morning to you, Terry. It's the 21st, yes. Again,
There we go.
friendly reminder, yes.
Well, I'm glad you are awake on this good Thursday morning, and good morning to the listeners who have joined us on this, the Fifth Connection.
Yeah, always thankful for you. We really appreciate your company here. Thank you so much.
Here we go. We are going to continue part 2 of what we started yesterday in our discussion through the book of Colossians. We are walking through this letter, and the story unfolds across 4 chapters. And the writer is Paul to the believers at Colossae, the assembly, in which he is challenging them to wise up. Wise up. The challenge is go on to maturity, because wisdom is personified in chapter 1. It showcases itself in skillful living. Wise living will show. So not only does it showcase wise living in chapter 1, but in chapter 2, the instruction is simple. The prompt is that we shun senseless living. This frivolity that we are given to. Shun senseless living. This is the real world with real life challenges. Our lives are at stake. Our testimonies are at stake. And so the chapter talks through the pitfalls to wising up. Pitfalls that can be avoided. Now in chapter 3 and 4, he's talking about the postures. How do you posture for wisdom? Wisdom is not something that you possess. It's something you reach for. And it's something you constantly go after. It will cost you your life to discover it. And so in chapter 3, verse number 22, the writer is addressing the issue of slaves' relationship to masters and the other way around. How do we relate to each other within this context of the believing community? We are part of an assembly. This is an organic assembly. It is alive. It buzzes with life and vitality. And so we took the time yesterday to look at vocations. How in our vocation can we honor and glorify the risen Lord? In our jobs, we have this idea and I think it's a very a real life experience in the South African context, because somehow work does not have dignity. If we don't have to work, we don't want to. If we don't have to, we'll just sit, soak, and sour. And yet the text here in verse 22 of chapter 3 addresses the issue that we need to give ourselves entirely to our work. I cautioned you yesterday about trying to draw overly strict lines between the master-slave relationship and a boss or an employer-employee relationship. We need to look for the similarities that exist between the two realms in terms of our application of the text. What are the trans-temporal constants? What are the principles that rise out of the text, rise out of the story, that are applicable in a 21st century context? So we give ourselves to our job entirely in verse 22 and 23, exclusively, and then in verse 4 and 25, equitably. So let's look at the text itself in a first-hand kind of way. And what I'd love to do this morning is, in a moment or so, I'm going to pull Theo into the discussion, because he and I, over a short 43-year window, have been involved in a number of different experiences, some painful, some joyful, and everything else in between those two. Of course, he's the serious one and I'm the joker. No, that's not true. I think serious Theo single-handedly has been the guy that challenged me. I never forget a question you asked me one day. Why are you so serious?
Did I ask that? I don't remember.
I will never forget it
Yeah, that's good to know.
because sometimes we take ourselves far too seriously and we don't take God seriously.
Mm.
And if you grow up the way I did, you have this idea that God is sitting in the celestial heavens,
Mm.
the celestial realms, with the seriousness of a celestial Buddha. If you know anything about the perfume Jade East, it comes in the shape of a bottle or a plastic container, the shape of a Buddha. And it's got a very serious look on its
Mm.
face, on its face. Um, and so I want to talk a bit into that. Some of the experiences we've had. We've done wonderful ministry things in all kinds of realms. Just think of how we started out and we hit the road and we were involved with teachers and principals. And that sort of has been a repetitive thing. We've had a great burden for education in our own country and in our churches. So we met with principals and HODs. We've had conferences in Bloemfontein where we've done some real fun things with these very serious intellectual types. But not too long, not too many years ago, we got involved in an endeavor which took us into the agriculture space. And I want us to talk about that a bit, but I want to go to the back to the text first and have us notice how that we have our God's eye on our lives. And we are to work with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Because whatever we do, Scripture says in verse 23, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. For the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done, and there is no partiality. So, as those who work jobs and who function in the workspace, that is as much ministry as what I do when I lead believers in a song, in an assembly meeting, as much, it's got as much gravity to it as when I read the scriptures in public in front of that people group, as when I am teaching in the classroom, as when I'm hitting the road as a salesperson to sell stuff. And so, Theo, you and I have been involved in a very interesting endeavor, and you always tire me out endlessly. So, talk very quickly to the audience about the entity called Learning Academy and how we eventually got involved in the agriculture space, which is ministry with a capital M, not a small m. Uh, the floor is yours, Theo.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of take us back way to 2000, the year 2000. In fact, I was studying at Stockholm University at the International Institute of Pedagogy. That what it was called, um, and we were trying to determine a teacher attitudes toward change. And the reason why we took the idea of change or shifts had to do because the then Minister of Education, the late Mr. Kader Asmal, commenced this project called Tirisano. And that
And
had,
tell the audience quickly what
yeah.
Tirisano stood for.
I mean,
what it meant.
if I remember correctly, do you have the concept there in front of you, or?
I don't have it in front of me. I
Yeah,
thought you'd remember it.
yeah. No, I mean, this is a good
But it
20.
had
It's
everything
almost
to do with education
yes.
and
It's about a
doing a
quarter.
better job.
Yeah, I think we can sort of quickly find that out. But the idea was, it was something different. It was something new. It was certainly. I'm just punching it in here now, and um, Now I'm coming to a consultancy, and anyway, but the idea was to, in a way, if I understood correctly, just deal with the needs within education. And was a focus on teacher development. That was a big thing. Um, so since then, we've always had our hands um, in the education space. So I would
Now,
say,
talk to us quickly about how you turned the corner that we got into,
to where we are now.
started Learning Academy and the agriculture space.
Right. So
Take a short left.
yeah, what happened was that as a consequence of a desire to plow back into South Africa, living in the US at that time, I had then embarked on a teacher training or teacher development kind of idea. That was the idea. How can we support teachers? That's where it started, and that's way back in 2007. And so that brought us into contact with a lot of teachers and principals, and they were very eager to hear how do other education systems work and so on. And I brought you along through those experiences as well, as we started connecting with folks in Durban in particular, many schools in that region, but even in the Western Cape there were schools, and then in the Northwest Province there were schools, and in the Free State, of course, and Mpumalanga.
Yep. And just to add our forward-leaning we were, Theo, I developed a life skills portfolio, and we talked about that even before the education department thought of introducing the subject of life orientation.
Yes,
remember
absolutely.
how cutting edge we were.
Yeah, and we actually wrote a
and
letter.
So are, I think.
We wrote a letter to Kader Asmala during those years, and I still have a copy of his reply, where he had acknowledged receipt of this letter. So it is undeniably so that it was, it landed in the orbit of these folks. That was an opening to all these principals, all these different schools. And when we launched something called Wise Hub, where we wanted these principals to start taking charge of their environment and stop saying the government must do this and the department must do this, and we try to encourage them to look at themselves as change agents. And that happened in Durban to start off with in 2012, and then in subsequently annual events in Bloemfontein, but also in the Western Cape. You'll remember that year when we were, on two occasions, we were in Mowbray, and the other one we were in Pinelands.
There we go.
And then in 2019, we had launched the vocational training in agriculture. And the move there for me was specifically intended to strengthen young people, unemployed young people, and small-scale farmers within the regional context in South Africa with knowledge about farming, skills to improve their capacity to transform their knowledge into a model that can work for them, where they can start their own business, or they could become more employable. And then thirdly, of course, to appreciate the wonder of just working with the soil and spill over into a meaningful life. We've had loads of folks who've been interested. We're in the middle of that project right now, and part of our teacher training development have been funded by the European Union.
So we're going to stop you right there, Theo, because this is exciting stuff, and we are zipping through it, because I want us to do a part 3 tomorrow morning.
Sure.
Where we just take it a little slower, because I want us to see the connection between ministry and ministry. The workspace, the workplace, and the assembly space. I was scared to use that word church because it's got such terrible baggage in our own cultural situation.
Unfortunately.
4 walls.
Yeah.
I think we can redeem the term. The term is redeemable. But I would love for us to take a little more time tomorrow, talk a little more about Agri Academy and how that ministry shift happened, and how your own local church in Sweden has become part of that, showing the connection between ministry and ministry.
Yeah.
What we do with believers and what we do in our workspace.
And also remind me tomorrow then to also touch on how individuals, God-fearing men and women, have taken on the support that they can provide as a ministry, they themselves, in terms of the role that they played. So
Wonderful. I will do that, Theo. So back to you.
thank you very, very much. And thanks for those of you who listened in. We are back tomorrow. But in the meantime, is that song that Terry got us to listen to yesterday, Work the Works by Danny Bell. This is so fascinating, Terry. The song was published 1974. Goodness me. What? That's 50 years ago.
That's it.
Exactly. Now, thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Terry, this morning, thank you. Thanks for this discussion.
Thank you,
it's really,
listeners.
really very
Sure.
good.